Hi there everybody, it's Jackie here from Stampingjack.com and it's Monday again. It's Monday the 8th of October and we are back again for our weekly Facebook Live session. Thankfully this week I'm on time. I had a slightly less stressful day today at work. I got away on time, even had time to have some dinner before we started. So I'm feeling relaxed and ready to craft with you guys. So as you join, just leave me a comment below to let me know you're here, say hi. Tonight, what I've got for you, hi Jude, welcome. Tonight I've got something a little bit different for you because tonight we're going to get a bit technical. Obviously, I'm always showing you ideas and inspiration and tips and techniques and all sorts of lovely, pretty things for your cards. But this week what I want to do is I want to get a bit technical with you because I want to talk about how to cut your cardstock, how to measure it, how to get your layers right, and just some tips and tricks about the kind of equipment that you need, and just how to get it absolutely spot on. Hi there, Janet, welcome. Because when I look at cards and when I started card making to begin with, the one thing more than anything else that let my cards down, oh, everybody's coming in, hi there. Yes, the one thing more than anything else that let my cards down was crooked layers and crooked lines, and I wasted so much cardstock and paper trying to get my measurements right and everything else. And in our classes, I usually have everything cut in advance to make it nice and easy. But one of the fundamental skills that you need as a card maker is cutting your cardstock on your paper so that you can do it for yourself at home. So I thought for tonight, I'm just going to go through my tips and tricks and what I do to get my layers looking absolutely spot on, cutting my cardstock properly. So before we get into that, let's do the prize draw. So the prize last week was a pack of the Eastern Gold stickers. Obviously, this is the prize draw for sharing the video. And I see, Lynn, you've shared already, so that's great. Thank you very much. And the winner of it is Jude. So congratulations, Jude. You've won the stickers. I shall be in touch and get them in the post to you. Yep. So well done. So So this week, the prize I've got for you is one of these mono sand erasers. These are really, really popular, and Stampin' Up! Don't carry these, but they're really, really handy. I've always got a few of these in the box on the table, and they're great for rubbing out little ink smudges or little accidents and stuff. They're great. So that is the prize this week. All you got to do to win this is to simply share the video. It's as easy as that. So get on there right now and share away, which would be fantastic. Oh, Jude's let out an eek. Congratulations, Jude. Right, so let's get down to business. Cardstock and how to cut it. All right, so let's move this out of the way. So I'm going to start in centimeters because that's how I work. I'm post decimalization baby, and so I work in centimeters, but I will do it in inches as well when I'm done. Okay, so bear with. The other thing to let you know is that I know that quite a lot of you are from the States. I'm working with the standard UK A4 size paper or size card, so the measurements themselves in the US will be slightly different, but the principles remain the same. Okay, so there we go. So before we start, I want to explain a couple of things about paper sizes. So obviously we have standard A4 cardstock here in the UK, okay? And how paper sizing works is A4 is half of A3, so A3 is the really big piece, okay? And then A5 is half of A4. And then A6 is half of A4 again. So that's just a little thing to help you with the terminology. When somebody says an A5 card base, what they mean is something half of a sheet of A4. They're talking about the whole thing. A6 is actually the size of the front of your card. Okay, it will make more sense when I start cutting. And then the other thing is, obviously, to get a good clean cut, you need a good cutter. Now, I do a lot of cutting and I like to use my guillotine. So there's basically two different types of cutters. There's a guillotine, which is this, I don't know if you can see it, where you've got a handle that just slices this way. So what I like about the guillotine is that this here, I don't know if you can see this, let me see if I can flip it over. So this here, the cutting blade, actually is not sharp, okay? What it does is it cuts by friction, if you will. And I find that for a good, clean, straight cut, you just cannot beat a guillotine. And the other thing is that guillotines, because of the nature of them, they haven't got a sharp blade, guillotines don't tend to have, their blades don't tend to blunt. So I use this for most of what I do. And you can see that I've got centimeters and inches, and it's also usefully got some guides here for standard normal sizes. It does have a rotary cutter on this side, but I don't tend to use it. The key thing with a guillotine is to make sure that it's got a guard here, because what you need to do is just, when you put your cardstock in, and as when you put your cardstock in like this and you measure it, okay, then you want to press that down, and that holds your cardstock in place whilst you cut, so that you get a nice straight cut, okay? I find a guillotine good as well for cutting cardstock that's a bit, if it's gone a bit wonky, it's easy. If you hold it along the bottom, you can see if you've got bits sticking out over the edge, you can always trim it. So I love my guillotine, okay? And as card makers, the most important thing you will have in your toolkit is your trimmer. So it's definitely worth investing some time, energy, and a little bit of money in getting yourself a good one. You can cut with steel rulers, you can cut with rotary cutters, you can cut with all sorts of things, but if you want good, clean, straight cuts, then a proper trimmer is what you want. And they're not that expensive. You don't have to go for an industrial strength one. I like to use my guillotine because, as I say, I do a lot of card cutting, and it would, anything that has a blade, obviously blades blunt over time, so I would have to replace my blades a lot. So the other alternative, which I also use when I've got slightly less heavy duty work to do, is our Stampin Trimmer, okay? And there's a couple of things that I like about this compared to the guillotine. First thing is you'll see that it's much more portable, so it doesn't take up as much space, it's easier to store away, it's much more compact. It also has centimeters and inches on it, and it has an arm that pops out so you can measure all the way across. It's got 14 inches on it there, actually. Don't know if you can see. And it's also got, here's your guide so that you can hold your cardstock in place. This has measurements on it too, so you can measure both ways, which is great. And also it's got the smaller measurements on the side. Now I'll come back in a little while and talk to you later about how to cut thin strips. The other great thing about the trimmer is that it also has a score blade on it. So if you're starting out, this is a great way to get your cutter and your scoring all in one without having to then buy a scoreboard as well. So it's a really cost-effective option, and I'm just, for ease, I'm going to use this tonight. The only thing I would say is that obviously this is an actual blade in here, okay? You do well to cut yourself on it, but like any blades, it does need maintenance and it does need replacing from time to time. The other thing when you're in terms of maintenance for your trimmer is this bit here. This is your cutting guide. This pops out, and sometimes over time you'll get little bits of paper dust and what have you in here. So I just tend to clean that out with I use a paper piercer and a bit of WD-40, and that just clears that out. Okay, and then at the top here you can lock this in place so it doesn't move about, which again is great if you're transporting. Okay, so let's start with a standard sheet of A4 paper. Okay, this is UK A4 paper. Now, the size of a sheet of A4 is a bit odd. It's 21 centimeters this way and 29.7 centimeters that way. Okay, now if you remember, a standard A5 card base is half a sheet of A4. But if you're trying to cut a piece of A4 into half and you're dividing 29.7 centimeters, you know, it's quite difficult to try and gauge it on here and try and get down to 0.2 of a centimeter. So what I tend to do is I kind of round it a little bit to make life easier for myself, okay? And what I say to myself is, my card base, I'm going to make it, instead of 14.7 centimeters, I'm going to make it 14.5 centimeters, okay? So just cut my cardstock in half that way. And then what I do is, I then need to trim it a second time. Okay, so what I end up with is a little strip, this size. Now I keep these strips because these are handy, and you see these on cards. I use these for little sentiments and things like that. So what I now have is a card base which is 14.5 centimeters by 21 centimeters. Okay, so it's slightly different to a standard card base. And the reason I do that is because then it makes it really, really easy to calculate my layers, all right? So I have this little crib sheet that I keep by my desk that helps me to remember the different card sizes. Now, if you'd like me to send you this, I have it as a PDF, just leave me a message and I will do that, okay? So what we've got here is we've got our standard card base, which is 14 by 21, okay? But you'll know from watching me that quite often I cut my cardstock the other way to create what's called a tent fold, okay? So what I do in that instance then is I take my A4 sheet and on the long side, okay, I trim it, bring it down so you can see. You can see that it's, you know, 29.7 centimeters, which is a bit tricky. So I just trim mine to 29 centimeters. Okay, so you can see I've got that same strip. And then what I do is I just trim it at 10.5 on the short side. Now when you're cutting, always make sure whatever you're using that either the bottom or the top of your cardstock is butted up against the guides, and that will give you a nice straight line. Okay, so there we have two tent fold card bases. Okay, now you can see I've got a slight edge there, so I'm just going to trim that. It's like a tiny little piece, and that means I know that my cards are 10.5 by 14.5 when I fold them in half. All right, you're still with me? I know it's a bit technical, but once you start playing around with it, it becomes clear. All right, and if you've got this really helps. So there are card bases. So then let's get to our layers. Okay, so let me just grab some white cardstock. So then what I do is I just make my layers a ½ centimeter shorter each, or smaller each time. Now the thing to remember with your layers is that if I take 1 centimeter off, it gives me a border of ½ centimeter on either side. Okay, I'll show you what I mean. So my standard first layer, so the front of my card is usually 14.5 by 10. Okay, so then my first layer I would trim it to 14 by 10. This is all centimeters. I will cover inches, don't worry. Okay, and what that gives me is if I fold my card in half, okay, now you can score on this as well on the trimmer, which is great, but I'm not going to bother with that at the moment. So then what I have is I've got my card base and a lovely, perfectly even border all the way around. Okay, that's with a ½ centimeter off. Now, if I was to take a full centimeter off and do a layer that was 13.5 centimeters, let's do it this way, 13.5 centimeters by 9.5 centimeters. Okay. Then I get, again, my nice even layer, and that goes on there like that. Okay, now if I bring in my original card base, boom. Okay, so this is a standard card base, and if I put this on here, that's what a 1 centimeter border or gap will look like. So you've got 1/2 centimeter on either side. Okay, so all I do, okay, so now let's take a white piece. So then I want a 13 centimeters by 9. So let's trim 9 by 13. And you can see, because you're going down 1/2 centimeter each time, it's just so much easier. Okay, and then we'll do one more, which is 12.5. 12.5 by 8.5. Okay, so we have, to recap, we have our card base, which when folded gives you a front of 10.5 by 14.5. And then we have a layer which is 14 by 10. Then we have a layer which is 13.5 by 9.5. And then a layer which is 13 by 9. And then a layer which is 12.5 by 8. And you could keep going as low as you want, but I wouldn't normally have that many layers on my card. Okay, so that's centimeters. And as I say, if you want me to send you this crib sheet, I'm happy to do so. Just leave me a comment below and we'll sort it out. Now, as I promised, not everybody works in centimeters. A lot of people work in inches. Like I say, I prefer centimeters, but when we get to inches, okay, I've already cut the pieces up because I can't think of inches on the go. So what we have is, we have our card base, which is 8.25 by 11.75, okay? And what I tend to do when I'm cutting mine in half, again, just to make it easier, I'm just going to cut the first one, is I cut this to, let's have a look, 8 centimeters, 8 inches on the short side. So I'm just going to trim like a 1/4 inch off the side here. No problem, Lynn. I'll send one to you. Okay. So again, we just trim off a little bit and it just makes it, the fractions, much, much easier. Okay. And then what we have is our card base is 5 3/4. So on here, this is a 16th and this is a 1/4. So it's 1, 2, no, wait a minute. It's a half, so that's a 1/4. 1, 2, 1. That's the 1/4 there. I'm just trying to see if I can show it there. So that's your 1/4, that's a half, 3/4, and the full. So we want it by 3/4. Okay, so that gives you your card base. And what that means then, because you've got 5 3/4 by 8, now I will do up one of these in inches as well, so if you want an inches one, just tell me, okay? So because we've got our 5 3/4 by 8, it makes it much easier to calculate. Again, we go down, what do I go down? I go down 1/4 of an inch each time. So here, what you got is, when I fold this, you got 5 3/4 by 4, okay? And then you go down a 1/4, you go down 1/4 of an inch, so then you have 5.5 by 3 3/4. Go down another 1/4 of an inch, and you've got 5 1/4 by 3.5, and then another 1/4 of an inch, you've got 5 by 3/4. Okay, so it looks pretty much the same as this one. The gap is roughly the same. It's slightly different, but it's roughly the same. So if you wanted a 1/2 inch, no worries, Doreen. If you wanted a 1/2 inch border, okay, what you would do is, because you need a half here and a half here, you would take 1 inch away. Okay, and then similarly here, if you wanted a 1/2 centimeter border, you need a 1/2 centimeter here and a 1/2 centimeter here. So you take off 1 centimeter, or you add 1 centimeter. Okay, so if I just grab a piece of paper and I'll show you what I mean. If you have a panel that is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, this will make it easy. Okay, and you want a 1 centimeter border. Okay, your finished piece will be 12 centimeters by 12 centimeters. Does that make sense? So that's just the logic to say, and it's the same. If you had a 6 inch by 6 inch piece and you wanted a 1 inch border all the way around, you would need an 8 inch by 8 inch layer underneath it. Okay? Brain fried yet? I know it's hard work making you do fractions on a Monday, but it's definitely worth taking the time to get your head around this, because I know I've made the mistake, and I know you guys will have too, cut your pieces and they're the wrong size and there's a lot of wastage, not to mention the frustration. And that's where having this crib sheet is really good, because you just don't need to think about it. And you'll notice on my cards that these layer sizes tend to be the same. Okay, so there are standard sort of layers that we would use. Okay, now when it comes to working out what size piece you're going to need, what I use very often is I have my grid paper. Okay, and it's got centimeters on one side and it's got inches on another. I'm just going to grab a stamp set. So let's say I'm working on my layout, okay? And I know that I want to have this deer and this sentiment, okay? I'm going to flip that over the side centimeters. And I'm working out what kind of size I want. Now, one thing you can do is you can use your grid paper to line this up. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if I want a panel that just fits this deer, then I probably want something that's about 10 centimeters by about 7 centimeters. Okay, so I can work out what size panel I'm going to need. I can also add my bits, and I can see now what I probably need is a panel that's 12.5 centimeters by 7.5 centimeters. So that's how you just size it with your stamps. Now, what I tend to do is I keep standard sizes like this in my box, because whenever I'm cutting up cardstock for classes and stuff, I always have extras. So I always have my standard bases ready like this. So then what I can do is I can just take my stamps or my dies or whatever, and I just put them on. And because I've got the card base or the piece already cut to size, I don't need to guess. I can look at it and go, yeah, that works. Or I say, oh, you know, I might want a bit more space on here because I want to put a ribbon up the top. Or I might want even more space on here because I just want it to be a bit more open. So having these standard pieces already cut and just sitting on your table makes it really easy when you're designing your cards and you can place your bits on there. And that I find that really, really, really helpful. Did you get the emphasis on that one? Okay. So there we go. All right. So again, coming back to here, if I had decided that I wanted a piece, I would need to cut a piece for this that was 10.5 by 7. Okay. And I said, right, I have got 10.5 by 7. And I want a 1/2 centimeter border around each side. That means I need to add a centimeter because I need a 1/2 centimeter here and a 1/2 centimeter here. So then what I'll need is a piece that's 11.5 by 8. And that's how I work out my layers. Okay, and the principle applies exactly the same in inches. If you want to add a 1/8 inch border all the way around, then your piece needs to be 1/4 of an inch bigger. If you want 1/4 of an inch border, it needs to be 1/2 an inch bigger. So you just have to make sure to remember to double up when you're calculating your mats and layers. Okay, so that's that. Now, the other thing to tell you is when I'm trimming my cardstock, I end up with lots of pieces sort of this size and this size left over. Do not throw these away. These are perfect for sentiments, and I use them all the time. I have a jar that I keep where I just pop all these in. And the other thing it's great for is if you make a little mistake on your card, you can always just stamp it on the panel and stick it over the top. Okay, so there we go. All right, let's see where we're at. Okay, so I think this is my final tip is, and it comes back to when you're cutting your sentiments. Okay, if you don't have skinny little strips and you say, oh, I want a 1 centimeter strip or I want a 2 centimeter strip, it can be really tricky. If you look on my guillotine here, okay, you can see, let me bring the light in a bit more. Let's see if I can, there we go. See, 4 centimeters, it's really, really hard to measure. So if I wanted to do something that was, if I wanted something that was 2 centimeters wide, or that was, you know, less than an inch, it would be really tricky. So a quick tip for that is, I just move this stuff out of the way. All right. Let's say I have my piece here, okay, and I want, yeah, it's 15, and I'm just going to trim it to 14 to make it, all right? So I want three 2 centimeter strips, say, okay? Trying to measure 2 centimeters here, you can't even see it, okay? So what I would do is start at 14 and come down to 12, and then from 12 down to 10, and from 10 down to 8. And then I have my skinny 2 centimeter strips rather than trying to actually measure them. Okay? But if I'm using my trimmer, I mentioned this earlier, let's bring this back in, is that we have this, because the ruler here is see-through, you can actually see the measurements much more clearly. So for example, here's my 2 centimeters. So I can actually line it up. Okay? Now, the actual guide here on this side doesn't go across because it would interfere with the cutter. Okay, so what you do is you use this side, and also you use your lines here. So I can see this card is a bit crooked, so I'm going to use this side. Okay, so I can see this line here is my 2 centimeter line. Okay, and there I have my little 2 centimeter strip. You could also measure it on this side if you wanted. It's entirely up to you. There we go. Okay. Now, the other cool thing that you can do with the trimmer that you can't do with a guillotine is you can start your cut in different places. So with a guillotine, you can only cut all the way along one edge, okay? So let's say I have this piece of card, all right, and it measures 14 centimeters, and here's where this ruler comes in really handy. I can see that it measures just over 11 centimeters down here. So I'm going to trim that to 11, just to make it easy. Okay, get rid of that little bit. So you can see you've got your measurements on both sides. Okay, so we've got 14 here. Can you see that? It's 14 here and it's 11 down here. All right. So I want to, say I wanted to cut an aperture in the center of this, okay? And I know I want to cut from, let's see, I want to cut from 9 centimeters here up to 3 centimeters. I can do that. So you've got a little pointer on here, so you just trim it up to 3. Okay, and then I pick it up and I can bring this down, okay, and I'll say, right, I want to cut from 10 up to 3. Same, okay. Whoops, I've missed that. We'll do that again. I hadn't placed my cut here. You need to make sure that your cut is in the right line. Okay, so 10 up to 3. Okay, and then we want to cut from here. I want to cut up to there. Okay. Okay, now if I'd measured that properly, let me get the scissors. Whoopsie. If I'd measured that properly, that would have just, but you can then trim it very easily, like so. So there you go. So that's a really easy way to create nice apertures on your cards, like so. Okay, very, very simple. So there we go. Now, that's it for the cutting. But you know what? I feel like I should really make a card. So I'm going to do a little technique that I've been meaning to do for a little while now. So let me just gather. I think I've mixed up my centimeters and my inches. I hope not. Right, so let's see. Yeah, there we go. All right, so this is a technique that really needs good layers. All right. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so let's grab so I want my card base here, and I want my 14 by 10, and then I want some small layers, so let me grab some more pieces. Okay, so I'm going to skip some layers, so I want that's a 14 by 10, so I want a 12.5 by 8.5. It will all become clear in a minute. Okay. 8.5. Actually, I want 12 by 8. Yep, that's it. And now what I want to do is I want to go down a centimetre on either side. So I want to take 2 centimetres off. So I want 6 centimetres by 10 centimetres. So we want 10 by 6. Okay, can you see that? So I've got 3 layers. All right, and now this is just going to show you how to calculate. You're not using your standard sizes, how to calculate. All right, so I have here a piece that is 6 centimeters by 10 centimeters, and I want a small border around it. So what I want is a 6.5 by 10.5. Okay, so I'm just going to grab some scraps here. So I want 6.5 by 10.5. Okay, and if you were doing this in inches, you'd just add like an 1/8 of an inch or whatever. Okay, not that one. So then the same with this one. So what we have is we have a piece that's 8 centimeters by 12 centimeters. So what we want is a piece that's 8.5 centimeters by 12.5 centimeters. 8.5, 12 first. So 12 centimeters by 8.5 centimeters. Okay. Whoops, see, I've measured that wrong. What did I do wrong there? Because I wanted 12.5, that's what it was. See how easy it is to do. So let's see, we've got 12.5. And let's just double check. So this piece is 8, so I want 8.5. And that should be right. 12.5 by 8.5, and this one is 12 by 8. Yep. Okay. So what we end up with okay. Where's my big gun? There it is. So we end up with some quite big gaps in our layers. All right. Right. Let me just go get a stamp. Let's see, what do I want? Let's use this one and get some inks. Okay, some blocks. So this technique is called triple step stamping. Okay, so I'm going to just take my white pieces and I'm just going to take a small piece, just a little, can you see that? Just the tiniest bit of snail. I'm just going to line this up in the center of the panel. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same again. Again, just a teeny bit. You just want it to hold in place. Okay, we're not sticking down. Okay, and now let's get our. I'm going to do some snowflakes. So let's do this one. Get some scrap paper. Alright. And I'm just going to keep the colour scheme in this really simple. But let's just, our layers have gone a bit funny. Okay, so now I'm just going to stamp. Alright, all over and across the layers. Okay. All right, and what you'll notice is that when you stamp with 2 layers of cardstock on top of one another, can you see you get a little gap here? You see you get gaps all the way around, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're just going to take these apart, okay? And then we're going to take our glue, and this is my other top tip for getting your layers straight, is use wet glue. You've heard me say it pretty much every time. So what we're going to do is bring back in our layers, okay? And we're going to stick our layers together. So we put our white piece onto our pool party piece, okay? And then we're going to put this piece. Remember to keep them the right way round so you can line the pattern back up again. Okay. Right, and I'm going to take this piece. So can you see what you want to do is line your patterns back up. Now, you can pop these up on dimensionals, but I just find it works better if they're laid down. Also because with your glue you can just, again, you've got that wiggle room to just get them lined up properly. Okay. The other thing is that they can be quite, is that it can get quite, the card can get quite thick because you've got quite a few layers on it. So if you're posting it, you don't really want to be stepping it up even further, increasing the postage. But if you're giving it away by hand, then you can put as many layers on it as you like. Okay, just make sure there. So by adding the little layer behind, you then get rid of that step. How's that? Okay, and then we're just going to put that onto our card base. Like so. Alright, and then I'm going to bring in one of our little scraps that we used earlier, and I'm going to stamp. We've got Season's Greetings, so I've actually got a skinnier one here. Okay, and I'm going to stamp that in Night of Navy. Get it the right way around. Okay, and I'm going to, what am I going to do with this one? Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually glue it down across the layers. Like so. Okay, oh, I've smudged it a bit, but don't worry about that. And then, where are my bits? Where have I got my pieces? Oh, here we go. So here are a few of the, some of the snowflakes that I cut out before from the coordinating blizzard thinlits. So let's add a silver one. Yeah, I think I might add white actually. There we go. So let's get a little mini dimensional. Pop it on the back. Pop that on there, and then let's see, add another one. Here we go. Like so, and then I'll just grab some rhinestones. Oop, where did that go? There it is. Pop one there. We want a large one in the center here. So there we go. Very, very straightforward, very, very simple, but just to illustrate just how to put your layers together. So there we have it. I hope that you enjoyed this evening. As I say, a little bit technical, but I think it's one of those things that once you get the hang of this, your cards will just look so much better and so much cleaner. So as I say, please make sure to share the video to be entered into a draw, which I'll give out next week for a mono eraser. If you'd like me to send you a crib sheet for the standard layer sizes, I have both centimeters and inches, then just leave me a message and I'll send it to you. As I say, keep this by you when you craft. I do it all the time and you just don't have to think about it anymore. It just makes so much easier. So there you go. Thank you again, everybody. It's been lovely having you with me, and I will see you again next week. Bye.